Hey, Bassgeek here. It is late winter and early spring, and there's one bait you better be throwing day in and day out. And I'm going to give you basically a master class on when to use it. Even though you can pick this bait up and go catch bass on it, I'm going to share with you how to maximize your opportunities. Now, there's no doubt this bait can catch bass any time of year and any time you pick it up. But I want to help you maximize your catch rate on this bait. Sure, anybody can pick it up and go out and throw it and catch some fish, but do you want to catch the biggest and the most fish every time you use it? Then you need to know the when, where, how, and why of every component of this bait. So what are we talking about? We are definitely talking about the Alabama rig. We're talking about the A rig. This is one of those baits, man, that almost anybody can go pick up and get started and really have a good time catching fish, catching doubles, catching triples, even just all kinds of multiple quadruples. It's an incredible bait when it comes to this time of year. Really any time of year if you got some dirty water. But there are some tips that if I could give you would help you out a lot. And it's going to maximize your presentation for the type of bass you're fishing, for the type of water you're fishing, and for the time of year that you're going to be throwing this. It really does all matter, and it all comes together. Let's start with the wire. The wire itself. You're going to have some baits that have a little more rigid wire, a little stiffer wire. This is the Flash Mob Junior. Now, this has a little stiffer wire, not as stiff as some, but this little bait is not going to have a lot of flex. A lot of times when you do a quick reel handle turn or a quick snap of the tip, the baits themselves are going to pulse, but the whole bait itself is not going to contract and expand a whole lot. As opposed to something like this. This is from Tornado Innovations. It's very soft, it's great in clear water, but it's really going to contract when you pulse that reel handle. A lot of times you do that. We'll talk more about that in the retrieve when you're looking at getting a little bit of extra action out of these baits. Another example of a good lighter wire bait is from Shane's Baits. Now what I love about this, as you can see, I'm missing a couple, but you can order different arms, and I got a bunch of them. So if they break off, which the softer Alabama rig arms do tend to break off, but you're going to get a lot more action out of them. And sometimes that can be key. So don't just settle on a more rigid bait. But Shane's Bait is probably one of my favorites to fish with. Now, this one has got some really thick wire. This is Big Daddy's Baits. And again, if I'm really fishing around some big bass, or believe it or not, if I don't care as much, the bass aren't as active, and I don't care as much about that flexing of the entire arm, getting the most action out of it, this is what I'm going to go with. Great bait, very durable Alabama rig setup. He makes a baby version, which is incredible and super durable. So this is probably one of my favorites, again, when I'm going to fish around bigger bass, or I know there's schools of bass. I know that I'm going to catch 2 or 3, and it's not going to pulse. The arms really, once you bend them out there, they're going to move very little, but they're going to last you a while. Now, to me, what are the situations when you're going to want a softer wire bait and a stiffer wire bait? A lot of times it's really based on the type of bass that I'm targeting. So if I'm fishing for like smallmouth or spotted bass, I'm probably going to go for a lighter wire because I want all the movement I can get out of that bait so that I can entice those bass. And those spotted bass and those smallmouth, you get something that's moving erratically and they're going to destroy it. When do I want the heavier wire? Probably when I'm looking for a little more subtle movement. A lot of times I'm fishing for largemouth. I want that subtle movement, not an exaggerated action like I'm gonna go for in dirtier water. I'm gonna throw something like this, and when those largemouth are bigger than normal size, something where I know these really aren't gonna hold up to several fish catches or 2 or 3 bass at the same time. That's the difference in wire. Now, let's talk about when to blade and when not to. So the conditions that I generally tend to throw an Alabama rig in and that I'm gonna have the most success in is gonna be some sort of cloud cover. It's like throwing a spinnerbait. You want some wind, you want some chop, you want a little stained water, you want some cloud cover. You know, this little pocket back in here and today would be perfect. We don't have a lot of wind, but we got some good dirty water. We got some good cloud cover. And you know, that sets up for a perfect situation to throw an Alabama rig, especially one with some blades on it. So when do I want to throw without blades? Now, especially if I'm throwing around largemouth in clearer water. So we might have some cloud cover and no chop, but it's clear water. I'm definitely going with something like this. Love this one because it's got that clear, I don't know if that's fluorocarbon or whatever it's made out of, but this is going to be super subtle. I'm going to throw this in a lot of different situations that a lot of times I wouldn't throw an Alabama rig at all. This is the umbrella rig from Yum. And this is going to be something that I'm still going to throw in those overcast, clear water conditions, maybe with just no wind, because they're really going to key in on those swim baits. And I might even go with a little different swim bait on both of these, something that doesn't have a lot of action, but we'll talk about that when we get into the heads and the baits themselves. So I'm over in Virginia today. I can fish 5, 10, probably 20 hooks if I wanted to. From as far as I can tell, there's no regulation in Virginia of how many hooks I can throw. Now on this lake, we can go just down the lake a little bit and be in Tennessee. Tennessee, you can only throw 3 hooks. So make sure you know what your state allows. Now I will tell you this, some states only allow 2 hooks. I'm probably going to go with something that's going to be a bottom and a middle. You know, that middle. Sometimes I'm not even going to go with 2 if they only allow 2. I'm just going to put one on that main bait on the back, because that's the one, put a little something different on it. But again, we'll talk about baits a little bit later. Hooks, I like a little bit of a light wire hook, unless I'm around some bigger smallmouth or some bigger largemouth, because if you get a hold of 2 of them, they can bend that out a little bit. But overall, I'm not picky about hooks. I mean, I tend to run 1/8 ounce all the way around. That's sort of my go-to weight. You'll adjust that based on the depth that you want to fish. Now, I'll go all the way up and throw some 1/4 and 1/2 on there, or I'll go all the way down to hooks alone if I'm fishing, say, a pond or something ultra shallow, and not even put a weight, just put some heavier gauge hooks on. I'm definitely not throwing high-end hooks and heads on these baits. To me, you have to be insane to do that. If you lose them, you're already going to lose so much money. So I know 6 Cents makes some good ones. We'll put some links out there. These are some local guys, Bumpkin Swimbait heads. They make some good ones. And I like the screw up head. The good thing about the screw up head is you can just unscrew them and take them off. And so your baits that you're using, you can just go ahead and screw them on and screw them off and reuse the baits over and over, especially if you got a little bit of that mended too. I mean, you can tell right here, this is some old Yum heads that I've just had forever. I don't even care if there's rust on these things. Trust me, if they can't get got on an A-rig, they can't get got. All that being said, I will put links in the description. Hey geeks, we're working with Tackle Warehouse. make sure you either scan this or you go to the description, save this in your bookmarks so that anytime you go to Tackle Warehouse, it helps us out, doesn't cost you a dime. We really do appreciate it. So now let's talk about the baits that we're going to use. Now this is a Scottsboro tackle swim bait. I like this in clear water or warmer water. And the reason why is because it doesn't have as much action. It's got a nice tight wiggle. Now if you think about it, during the warmer season, if you ever watch a fleeing bait fish, they got that, it's a shimmy versus a nice wide tail wag. Now in colder water, they've got a little bit wider, more deliberate tail wag. In clear water, I want that to look, especially around largemouth, a little more natural. So something like the Scottsboro is perfect for that. Another great bait is from Kayak, and this is the Easy Shiner. Now the Easy Shiner looks extremely natural, and this is a great color. This is Tennessee shad. It doesn't have, even though it's super soft, it doesn't have the wide tail wiggle that like the Swing Impact Fat or the Swing Impact have. So it's a little more natural, it's a little more subtle in the water. But most of the time, this really is my go-to. This is the 3.3 inch Swing Impact Fat by Kayak. This is actually one of my favorite colors, and it's one of the best colors for largemouth. I know everybody thinks about the electric blue chartreuse being a smallmouth color, but for some reason, the largemouth in the early spring love it. Now, my theory on that is, and we did a color video talking about color, and if you go to the end of this, I'll link that video talking about color and bass being cold water fish and how it affects their eyesight. So I think that it's a good bright color. Maybe it's because during the spring, you know, everything dirties up a little bit, but I've thrown this in some really clear situations and the largemouth love it. Smallmouth love it too. But if I'm throwing these baits, they've got a nice wide tail wiggle. It's going to be something that's got a lot of drawing power, going to draw those in. And it's also going to be something that I'm going to fish slow. So that wide tail kick is going to be something that I'm not going to fish fast on an A-rig. I'm going to fish it nice and slow and contour banks with it. This is another great color, and you can get this from Ramsey Baits. This is a color that the smallmouth smash, and this is called Sour Grape, and I love it. It is probably one of my go-to. A lot of times when I'm on, say, South Holston, I mix these colors because what'll happen is the smallmouth will come up and crush these on the bottom two, but I'll put this dead center and the largemouth will come hit that center bait. So it gives you the best of both worlds. And, you know, hey, if it works, why not? But again, I think the bright colors this time of year is because the bass are cold, especially in those 40s and low 50s. The bass are still cold, they're still warming up. I don't think they can see quite as well like natural or translucent colors. So something with a little bit of color to it, you know, these are a little darker, these are a little brighter, I think paints a bigger target on that school of bait fish. So when it comes to the swim bait you're going to use on an A-rig, think about it like this. More finicky bass, clear water, largemouth, go with a swim bait that's just a little more subtle in its tail wiggle. Now, for you geeks that can't use 5 hooks, something that I like to do, especially if you need the weight. So you need to get as much weight, get it down as deep as you can, because I like to fish these things deep, especially in early February. A great little deal that Picasso has is these little dummy heads. So you can go check those out. Again, there'll be links in the description, but this is one way. Another way you can do it is I'll go buy just some of the cheapest ball heads like Walmart can have. I can cut the hook off, bend it in and make a keeper. You can glue the swim bait on and you're good to go as far as needing a little extra weight. All right, geeks, anybody that has watched my channel knows that I love my graphs. You know, I fish deep water all the time. I fish clear water all the time. Graphs are important to me. Even back when I had a John boat, I had an Eagle gray screen graph on it that I hooked to a car battery on my old trolling motor. It just helps you learn the bottom of the lake. It helps you find fish and find bait, know the water temp so you know kind of where the bass are moving. So I love them. And the one thing that you need when you have some graphs is the Boat Effects mounts, both for the console and the bow. I love this right here because it's got the Boat Effects locks on there, which keeps your graphs safe. Anyway, Boat Effects, make sure you go check them out. You know I love my steps. You know I love my pedal, right? Yeah, anyway, down there, my foam on it, because those things get hot in the summer. You geeks know I like to fish in the barefoot. So go check out Boat Effects. I got a discount, link in the description. Go get your graph locks, your graph mounts, and your steps. So let's talk about rod, reel, and line setup. And this has to be one of my favorite combos. This is the Core Series A-Rig rod. This is from Cashin. And geeks, let me tell you a little bit about Cashin. Cashin is pretty much 100% American made. They make their own blanks in-house. A lot of companies can say, hey, we make the rods, but really when it comes down to it, they're saying they're assembled because they buy their blanks from somewhere else. So this is a 7'10" heavy mod fast. They're one of the few companies that actually make and build their very own blanks in-house. Love the grips. A lot of people wonder about the grips on these. Believe it or not, when they get wet, they get actually a little bit of tacky to them. So not like sticky, like you stuck your hand in something, you know what I'm saying? But so they don't slide off. So like I said, make sure you go check out the Cashin rods, guys. I'm telling you, they're pretty incredible. Now, the reel that I like to use, this is an old BB1 Pro, and you can see I like it because it's got a big wide spool, because I'm making long casts with this. They don't make this anymore. I'll put a link in the description to something. Their BB1 is pretty good. It'll cast pretty good. I probably, for me, with something like an A-Rig, if I'm going to go with a lose, it'd probably be a super. But anyway, I'm not going to get rid of this until it just doesn't work anymore. Now here's where we're going to get some hate, and we're going to talk about line. So this is 15-pound test Pro 100 K9. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, 15-pound test, da-da-da-da-da. Understand, I throw this over trees, around trees. I'm not getting it down in the trees. You know, I'll get it back. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, just tie braid on there. You can bend the hooks out. I don't like braid on an Alabama rig. Now you're going to, I know a lot of your arguments are going to be, well, they're seeing wire baits, but they're not hearing them. They're not feeling the vibration. If you can hear that braid coming through in the air, if you can feel it coming through your guides, if you can hear it going, wee, I promise you it's 3 times as loud in the water. Sound travels farther in water than it does in the air. So for me, and I fished with a guy, shout out to Trobaugh, hadn't got to talk to him in a few years. Trobaugh, if you're out there and you ever still watch, yell at me sometime, man. But he won a BFL on Del Hollow. This is pre-live scope with over 20 pounds. He accidentally tied on 15-pound test. But he said in practice, he was getting more bites off that A-Rig, and he had 2 of them set up identical to each other than he was getting from the 20-pound test that he normally throws. Now, I will say this, if you're a beginner at it, 20-pound monofilament, it is forgiving. Do that. That way, if you get a bird's nest, you're not going to snap it off. You don't have to worry about it. Me, I've been throwing these for years and years. So the K9 15-pound Pro 100 is what I'm going with. And as far as getting them out of trees, there is a trick to it. You don't have to have the braid. You can go over, don't shake them because you're just going to get it in more into the tree, all the hooks. But if you go over to it and you reel down, a lot of times they'll pop right loose, even when you set the hook on them. So they're not hard to get back. So to me, the braid argument about bending your hooks out, it's garbage. Geeks, I almost forgot reel speed. Listen, a 6.4 to 1 is as fast as I go. Generally, I'm going to run in that 5.4, 5.3 to 6.3, 6.4. You do not want a fast reel for an A-rig. Let me go show you a few retrieves and a few tricks to casting these things and keeping even the softest from getting tangled up when they hit the water. Now, when I fish an Alabama rig in the spring, I'm going to fish it on the bank 90% of the time. I'm not going to throw it out in open water. I don't know why, but I've had a lot of people comment that they think an Alabama rig is really an open water bait. Think about it like a spinner bait. That's really the same places and situations I'm going to throw an Alabama rig. So even going down a bank like this, so some of the things that I am going to tell you now, I'm not going to tick laydowns with this bait. I'm going to bring it over it because it's got so much drawing power drawn up over it. However, I am going to throw over the deeper edge. Now, I mean deep edge out here. I'm not going to throw up in here. I may hit a corner, but I'm going to pull the boat away and cast more straight toward the bank when it comes to a laydown like that. That way, I'm not getting hung up as easily. So deeper edge, the absolute deeper edge, and then pick apart the corners and come across it straight out. Now casting an A-rig, there's a little bit of a trick to it, especially something like this that's super soft. And that deal is when you make that cast, you want to make sure you stop it before it hits the water. Don't let it tumble and then raise the rod tip. It's a lot like fishing a buzz bait. You want to throw it out there, stop it with your thumb, raise that rod tip right before it hits the water so it kind of pulls the bait in the right direction as it starts diving down so it doesn't tumble and you don't get twisted or snagged up or fouled up with all of the hooks that you're throwing. Now when it comes to retrieve, the retrieve is pretty simple, and again, it's to me just like a spinner bait. A lot of times I'm going to be reeling at a nice slow pace, and then I'm just going to give it a quick turn, just maybe a half turn of the reel, or I'm just going to stop it and then give it a quick turn of the reel. A lot of times that's going to make those baits pulsate just a little bit, whether it's on a soft bait and you get that real maximum pulsation, or whether it's on a hard wire and you just get those baits to just flick and those blades to just do something a little bit different right now. And you know, setting the hook on these things, you're just going to side set. Don't fight them. You got a ton of hooks. Now, one trick, if you want to try that whole double, triple thing, when you feel one hit, just give it a little bit, reel into it real quick, and keep coming with it. A lot of times, if you don't just swing and pull that bass and pull that bait away from the rest of those fish that are following it, that's how you double up. So just give it a quick reel turn and keep reeling so that you set that hook and maybe pick up 2 or 3 other bass in the process. Now, most of the time I'm boat hopping them. I'm not going to wait for a net. Hey, I don't want to get all the hooks in a net, so I'm going to boat hop them. I mean, you're fishing with heavy line, you're fishing with a heavy bait, so I'm just going to boat hop them in. If you want to net them, I get it. I definitely would not stick my finger down there or my thumb down there to get them. So one thing I do really want you geeks to go try, even you bank anglers, go out there and try an Alabama rig, an A-rig. There are a ton of small ones. There's a great one that we just found from, I don't remember the lure company that makes them, but I know they're on the Brazzalo website, and I'll put those in the description too. A trick For all of you bank anglers, or if you're fishing super shallow water, just use a heavier gauge hook, no weights whatsoever, or just weight the bottom two, extremely light weights if you have to. But a lot of times you can just use some heavier gauge wires on the bottom to keep it running right and use no weights whatsoever. You wouldn't believe how well that works from the bank. Now, if you want to talk about winter color selection, why I think the bass can see brighter or darker colors this time of year, because they're cold-blooded, and I think it affects their sight. Make sure you go check out this video right here. Otherwise, questions, comments in the comments section below. You geeks know I love to talk about fishing with you. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell. Be part of the 100% Watch Squad. And you geeks rock.